The advice I have for the newer upcoming generations is to go past the condition of bass player and attempt to be a true artist, expressing themselves through the bass.
Here we are with a long overdue conversation with the great Catalin Rotaru. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and Catalin has just come out with not one, but 2 solo albums. What? He has come out with Sonic Bridges Volume 2 and The Lord of the Basses. So, Lord of the Basses is what we're discussing mostly here today, and this album was recorded on Bottesini's famous Testore bass. So cool. We talk about the backstory of this, how Catalin got the opportunity to play this, how he picked the repertoire, all that kind of good stuff. And you will be hearing several clips from The Lord of the Basses, which is available for purchase. Highly recommend it. It should be in every bass player's collection. What a historic document, and just how cool that Catalin got the chance to do that. And I'd like to, before we get going here, give a shout out to our sponsors. I'd like to thank the A440 Violin Shop, which is in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, my longtime hometown for over 20 years, and it's located just west of Wrigley Field. It provides instruments for students, professionals, jazz players, theater players, classical players. I've had my bass worked on multiple times, always been happy with what they provide, repairing cracks, resetting sound posts, all that kind of good stuff. And if you are looking for a bass or you have a student looking for a bass, check out a440violinshop.com. And the English Double Bass Book is a new book that's examining the great English double bass makers of the 18th and 19th centuries. This is from Tom Martin, George Martin, and Martin Lawrence. It will be available in 2018. You can pre-order your limited edition copy at theenglishdoublebass.com. All right, here we go with our conversation featuring Catalin Rotaru. Maybe we could start just by talking about, like, how did this opportunity to record on Bottesini's Testore, how did that opportunity evolve?
I guess I was lucky. I first saw the instrument, 2 or 3 years ago at a bass camp in Tokyo, where the owner brought over the instrument for all of us to see. And that was my first time, and I was just mesmerized. It's such a cool feeling. And it's a great feeling for 2 reasons. One, it's a Testore, right? So it's similar to playing a Stradivari violin. And second, even more important, the greatest bass player that ever lived played that instrument all his life, composed. It was funny, during the recording, I got overwhelmed with these emotions because I understood that the pieces I'm about to record, that bass knows. That bass played those pieces, God knows how many times. And not just played, but Bottesini composed, probably, most likely, using that instrument. Because he found it when he was about 19 or 20 years old, when he was a student in Milan at the conservatory. At that point, the instrument was already over 100 years old, right? There is a nice tag inside the instrument, the Testore label, and you can clearly see 1716, the year of making. So, naturally, Bottesini loved the bass so much that for the rest of his life, he played, composed using that instrument. He toured, actually. He traveled with that bass to the Americas. Actually, there were 2 more tags inside the instrument, repair tags. One from Madrid and one, you wouldn't believe this, Buenos Aires, Argentina. So you have 3 tags inside the instrument. I took a picture. It's very nice because it's just history, you know. And you can see probably during the transportation, probably the bass got damaged. Who knows? So Bottesini took it to some luthier for repairs.
Wow, so that's the bass that he was traveling all around the world with.
And there is no doubt we have some nice sketches and also photography from back then, late 1800s. Photography has already begun, as far as I know. And you can compare the instruments back to back, side to side, and you see precisely it's the same. Another nice thing about this bass, Jason, is that everything is original except the bridge. Unbelievable. So from tuning machine to fingerboard, tailpiece, everything is what Testore put on the bass 301 years ago. It's pretty crazy. I was so excited. So you asked me how it happened. Again, I was so happy when I first touched the bass, and I remember Thierry Barbet was there also. Tom Martin was there. And just a little bit later, the invitation came from the owner to record a CD. And I kept thanking him and expressing my gratitude because it was overdue. This people knew who Bottesini, or everybody, even non-bass players know Bottesini, the name Bottesini. But very few people knew about his instrument, whereabouts, let aside the sound or even a close-up photo of that magnificent instrument.
So how do you even begin picking a program for an instrument like that?
Well, great question. Without a doubt, my first thought was, okay, this recording is not going to be about me. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the spirit of these two giant human beings who walked this earth. Testore, the fabulous instrument maker, and then Bottesini, naturally. So by default, having this premise started with this thought, it had to be Bottesini works exclusively. So yeah, what tunes? Difficult. Again, I was thinking I should choose a very balanced repertoire, maybe less flashy, because something more lyrical, more melodic in nature would feature the tone, the sound of the instrument. Hence, the three elegies I chose in the program. Elegy, the famous number 1, which everyone knows and plays all over the world, and then Romanza Drammatica, Romanza Patetica, elegies number 2 and 3 respectively. Plus the much less known slow piece, which I put the first on the CD, Adagio Melanconico ed Appassionato. Honestly, only about 2 or 3 years ago, I first came in contact with that piece, and I was melted. It's such a beautifully written, such an emotional, typical romantic, typical Bottesini, operatic, and all, So I said, these must be on the disc to showcase the sound, the tone of the instrument. And we did very minimum adjusting. We tried to capture as much as possible the natural sound of the instrument. And in fact, as I wrote on the CD cover, this recording is closer to an actual live performance more than a studio recording, due to the fact that we didn't have separate microphones. We were not far away from each other, so we can have a clear separation between the tracks of the piano and the bass. So I guess this is as good as it gets, and I'm so glad and grateful to everyone, from God to the owner, that I had this magnificent chance to produce this historic recording.
Well, and what an experience to play notes on that same bass that the great master played. That must have been just such an amazing feeling to like feel that voice coming out from your own fingers. This beautiful instrument.
It is, Jason. And like I said, I was overwhelmed almost to the point of tearing, but it was such a beautiful flux of emotions just that I felt in that moment. It's just nice, especially if you're a sensitive guy, but we all are. Musicians by default are more on the sensitive side.
Was there anything surprising about that bass when you finally sat down to play on it? Did it respond like you expected it to, or was it brighter, darker, bigger, smaller? Anything that surprised you when you got on that instrument?
Well, some things surprised me in an amazing, beautiful way. Some not so much. For example, it's a big instrument. Testore made big basses. So this one, no exception. It's a rather large, big instrument, which tells us Bottesini was a tall guy. And if you remember, there was one sketch caricature of him kind of going like this over the instrument with hands reaching down all the way. It's a nice caricature, nice sketch. Again, whoever drew that must have taken the account that he was a tall guy, probably long arms. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for him to play. On the positive side, like you mentioned, the word response. Unbelievable. Like the very first time, which was not now in July when we did the recording, but a year or two ago, I remember the thing that struck me was the ease of playing on that instrument. You barely show it the bow and it just shoots out sound. So nice. And of course, harmonics, which that instrument, those kind of frequencies, that instrument knew very well. You can tell by the ease of which harmonics were shooting out.
Well, what a phenomenal experience to be able to play these great works by this great master on the exact instrument, thinking back to like when he played it and before. I mean, I'm such a fan of this recording, so congratulations on getting this out there and spending the time with the bass. And I can't believe you also have this sonic bridges. When did this come together?
Oh, this is a nice, crazy coincidence that I don't know how many musicians managed to release 2 CDs at the same time, like it happened now. But it was just, the title is Sonic Bridges Volume 2, meaning there is a Volume 1. And that happened in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. Same orchestra, of course, different repertoire. So it's the National Symphony Orchestra of Paraguay. And I'm grateful to them for, again, the vote of confidence to do not 1, but 2 CDs with me. It was a great experience too. The only drawback, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it's the truth, and why not? It was a little bit difficult in the sense that I was never with orchestra in the same room. What happened is they pre-recorded the accompaniment tracks for all the pieces. I don't know how normal or usual this is in the world of recording of artists, but first time for me it was kind of like a shock because I didn't expect that, and I was surprised, and I said, oh shoot. In a way that prevents you from having some liberties of expression, right? Takes back a little bit from the phrasing, but somehow in the end everything worked out fine.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't have known that it was recorded that way. It sounds great, but it's certainly a challenge in terms of like taking a little more allargando than you might otherwise.
Synchronizing. There are some fast note passages which, if you're not metronomically there, it's impossible to get it. So in that sense, it was a little bit challenging. But I mean, the recording I recorded in a 5 by 5 feet little booth with the headphones. That's it. Nothing else.
I'd love to know, because you play so many solo concerts and like a recording project like that, or with the Bottesini, and then you on stage, let's say with orchestra or even piano in a larger hall. Do you change your approach to the bass and tone production? Does that do you feel like you approach the instrument differently in that real sort of like movie, sort of the mic's right on top of you versus like you being in a larger space with a larger group maybe?
Right. Well, I try not to. I try not to make a difference. And I play, at least my intention, even subconscious intention, is to play the same regardless of the environment, space, acoustics, smell, colors, everything, But well, naturally, another thing we all do instinctively, if it is a room, a hall with a lot of reverb, echo, then you instinctively try to play a little bit shorter. It's by default it happens, because if you don't play shorter, then you'll have a not so nice articulation and clarity in sound. But as far as everything else is concerned, volume, approach, expression, no, I try to play the same way. And I trust that whoever listens to my playing at the moment will get the best experience in those conditions.
I'm such a fan of your career and what you've done. And I remember back to, I think this is going back maybe to like 2000 or somewhere around there, the Midwest Bass Symposium. I think you were performing there. I remember seeing you play solo. I don't remember if it was with Michael Cameron or with somebody else, but I have wonderful memories of almost 20 years ago at this point, seeing you perform.
Yeah, time flies.
And it's just so exciting to see what you're doing, and like you're such a champion of the double bass and doing these projects and pushing the bass as a solo instrument, into new and people from all walks of life listen to this. We got students, we got professionals, we got amateurs, we got everybody, and like just your experience, like what you've done in the world of solo bass. If someone's out there who's maybe 15, 16, 17, and they're just inspired by what they see you doing, and they're interested in exploring the world of solo bass playing, I don't know if you have any advice that you might offer somebody, just you've had such a unique career. I know everybody's is different, but anything you might offer to people who are interested in doing what you're doing?
That's a great point, Jason. And of course, it can be an answer that can spread over 5 hours, or it could be a short, concise. Well, let's make it towards the short and concise. But first of all, I'm not the only one who's doing this. There are, it's a plethora of other great bass players, musicians. Of course, we all know each other. And we're all trying to do the same thing, to bring this magnificent instrument, which luckily we play, into the spotlight. Of course, it's a path that was started before me, my generation, by Gary Carr and Tom Martin and Rabat and the likes, So we just continue what they started. At least this is my take on it. This is how I feel, because I learned from them all. We all do still, in younger generations. We still learn from them and then go through everything chronologically. But the advice I have for the newer upcoming generations is to go past the condition of bass player and attempt to be a true artist, expressing themselves through the bass. Because I know what I'm talking about. I've come across many great musicians who basically are bass players. There's nothing wrong with that. But in my opinion, not enough, not the light at the end of the tunnel. There is so much more we can do. And I know, for example, and again, I don't want to criticize, but I know there are bass players who focus their entire energy and soul power on playing perfectly orchestral excerpts. Okay, well, if this is your goal, your final destination, go for it. But I think we all need to explore things past this automatic playing, which I try to teach my students to be open-minded and be ready for anything, especially in today's world, where the life of a musician is not quite as easy as it was maybe 100 or 200 years ago. I'm just saying. It's a very competitive market with a lot of great musicians all over the world, not just here in the US. And the job market is pretty scarce, as we know. So this creates competition. So I try to tell my students, of course you can focus on one direction or the other, but in general, try to master the instrument. Try to learn all the secrets of the instrument so you can tackle whatever life throws at you. If you have to play a Broadway show, be prepared. If you have to play a recital, be prepared. If you have to take an orchestra audition, be prepared. If you have to play a contemporary piece, be ready for that as well. Even walk a jazz line, if you feel inclined. I was a jazzer, still am, miss it. And I encourage my students to go in that direction if they feel the passion for it. I don't force them, but I strongly encourage them to go. Because I know for me, this symbiosis between jazz and classical was amazing, was fantastic. You take so many elements from one area, you apply to the others, and vice versa. And things just go better and better from there. So in the end, my advice would be to just try to be the best you can with whatever God put in you and with this amazing instrument, which has basically limitless capability.
Catalin, thank you for chatting. Folks, you know you want to hear all of that album, right? What a fantastic album. What a cool historic document like Catalin and I talked about this recording on that famous bass of these pieces. Love what you're doing, Catalin. Like we said as we were chatting, I've known Catalin for 20 years, a solid 20 years at this point, and I'm just such a fan of what he's doing with this project and all of his other solo and collaborative projects. And we will wrap up today actually with a track from Sonic Bridges Volume 2. Links to both of these new albums are in the show notes for this episode over at contrabassconversations.com, where you can get all of our vast archive of over a decade's worth of episodes. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. If it's your 430th, welcome back. And it's so great to be chatting with you each and every week here on the podcast. So glad to have you here. And we will close out today with a little bit of Sonic Bridges Volume 2.